Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is July 24th, 2012, and this is episode number 29.
In this episode, we're going to discuss infographics, Ramadan on Google, the junk web, Chili's bag, the bag lunch, an interview with Riley Gibson of Napkin Labs, and a review of the analytics app, and more.
Quite a bit of content. How's it going, Adam?
It's going all right, man. It's going all right. How about you?
It's going well. Got a little bit of a late start today. It sounds like we're going to be pushing it back a little bit for the rest of the month in observation of Ramadan, or more appropriately, I guess, to help you out with observing Ramadan. Is that correct?
Yeah. I figure we do our shows right around, actually right now when sunset happens, and that's the time that we get to eat. And because the summer days are longer than all the rest of the year, when we're fasting during Ramadan, I don't know if you know, but Ramadan kind of shifts because it's on a lunar calendar by like 10 days, kind of closer and closer on the calendar each year. So the last couple of years has been in the summer, and this is the third year that it's in the summer until it finally kind of migrates its way through the entire summer months. And so I can't eat from sunup, which right now is like 4:30 or 4:45, until like 8:30 at night, not even drinking water or anything. And so if we were to record our show, I think only a tenth of my brain would probably be working, and I'd be too busy dreaming about what my wife is cooking for dinner than the podcast. So thanks for letting us push it back a little bit.
We want you at the top of your game. We don't want to get a distracted food dreaming Adam on the show. So,
well, I can't say that I don't dream about food otherwise still, but a little bit more on these during this month.
There you go. All right. Well, we're actually going to talk about Ramadan a little later, but first I figure we dive right into our infographic of the week. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
All right, so today's infographic is somewhat meta or ironic, depending on how you want to look at it, but it's actually an infographic of infographics. And I think this is actually something we've seen before. I feel like this is almost a trend where people are like, oh, I've seen a lot of these infographics. I'll be clever and create an infographic about infographics. But this one was sort of interesting. It was created by someone named Ivan Cash, and he actually sampled 49 different infographics from the good.is site. So good.is publishes a number of really nice infographics. So he picked, basically 50 of them at random, looked at all the infographics, tried to pull data from those infographics, and then actually put together his own infographic that summarized those and talked about the different chart styles and fonts used and themes and how many sections they use, and even things like what's the color that the base of the infographic is based on. So figured we'd run through some of these and just kind of share some of this knowledge because it's interesting, and we of course will include a link to this in the show notes so you can check out the infographic for yourself. But diving right in here. So first off, chart style. I thought this one was kind of clever. It actually said 22% of the infographics used a pie chart, 24% used a pictorial chart, 24% used a line chart, and the number one chart style was actually the bar chart at 32%, which is kind of interesting because the bar chart, you're like, it's not necessarily the most exciting. I think maybe the pictorial chart is a better, more interesting graphical representation of data sometimes. But hey, it keeps it simple. Bar chart is the number one chart style, 32%. Moving on to things like font. So we actually have a pretty broad split between sans serif and serif. So serif fonts represented 15% of the infographics, with 85% represented by sans serif. And that's kind of evenly split between regular sans serif and condensed sans serif. So we actually got really specific, but I think what this is showing is people are choosing basic fonts because there's a lot of text, a lot of information in an infographic, so you've got to choose something where the font's not distracting from the overall look and feel. And even in the infographic of infographics, he's using a sans serif font, so I thought that was kind of funny. Jumping around a little bit to some of the other interesting things. So base color, 29% of the infographics he looked at used a white as a base color, and then 18% used kind of a light tan, and another 18% used a light gray. So a majority of these infographics, kind of a very plain background color, which again is sort of interesting. You think of infographics as being this very visual, bold, eye-catching thing, but so far we've got white background, sans serif font, and a bunch of bar charts. It's not exactly, putting these things in the best light. And then, looking at more of the actual data-heavy side of things. So the average infographic cited 2.29 sources, which, is kind of surprising. That came in a little low for me. I thought there would be more sources. We've talked about infographics before where you need to go out and do a lot of research and gather facts and look in a number of different places and bring that all together into your infographic. And really what this is saying is people kind of write a report, they publish something, and then they take that and turn it into an infographic. But it's not necessarily
kind of a repackaging of content that they probably have on their own versus spending the time going out and curating content from third-party sources.
Exactly, which, I think a lot of these are sort of marketing. So it's taking your marketing message and packaging it up into a new and hopefully easier to understand medium. But it sort of lends, some support to the idea that designers aren't going out and saying, all right, I want to learn about something, I'm going to research a lot of it, and then I'm going to put together this infographic. It's more targeted at, well, I have this information and I just want to share it in a different format. And then another interesting tidbit was the average number of words per title was 4.36, so just a little bit longer than 4 words for your title. So if you're putting together an infographic, keep that in mind. You got to keep it short and sweet and really grab people's attention with just a couple of words. You don't want this 20-word infographic name where people are halfway through reading it and they're like, what is this thing talking about again? You got to, keep it short and keep it to the point. So any of those numbers stand out at you, Adam? What kind of caught your eye on this infographic of infographics?
Well, I think you pointed it out that for the most part, most of the numbers in each of these sections kind of leans in the direction of vanilla, right? So folks are going for the vanilla things, the things that they think of, even maybe within their own PowerPoint presentations. They say, okay, I got a white background with a sans serif font and some bar charts, and we've just, we don't want to do a lot of additional work both on the design and the research side, so we're just going to pull together, a couple pieces of data or research that we have internally, and put it all together and make it an infographic. Where I think had we taken this survey or had he kind of tallied up these same results in this research a year ago or a year and a half ago, I think the numbers would have been quite different because it was a time where we were a bit less saturated with things. So I don't necessarily know if this is kind of a gauge or a measuring stick for best practices for anybody per se, but I think it's just an interesting thing to pay attention to. I took it more of an interesting exercise of just checking out what others had going on than anything.
Yeah, I think if you had polled, maybe instead of a random sampling of 49, if you said, I'm going to look at something like Visually, which is an infographic social network, and I'm going to pull the top 50 most shared infographics, you'd probably see very different numbers. I'm guessing the things that really get engagement, they're, again, it varies from the bar chart. They're going to use more pictorial charts and more interesting ways of representing data. They're going to use cool fonts. They're going to use a lot of different colors and really bring the story to life rather than just saying, well, we've got this, chart over here and let's turn that into a graph and that's good enough. Let's put that out there. I think, telling the story is what takes you from good to great and gets that thing shared broadly in the social web.
And I recommend folks go back to, I don't know if it was last episode or the episode before where there was an article we referred to that was like this list of just really great ways to a list of great ways to make sure that you produced an awesome infographic. And I actually, I think we both agreed that it really dug deep and shared some awesome tips on every part of the process from research to design to distribution. And so people should go back and check that out.
Definitely. All right. Well, enough about infographics. Let's dive into the meat of today's topics. And the first one that we've got up on the queue, and I think probably appropriate given that this is our first later show due to Ramadan, is Google getting serious about Ramadan. So this is a story that you had sourced, Adam, and so why don't you take us through it? Talk to us a little bit about what Google is doing to showcase some of the activities going on surrounding Ramadan.
Yeah, so I thought this was pretty interesting in a number of ways. So again, I'm observing Ramadan this month. My wife is observing Ramadan this month. So a number of family members, and for me, being born and raised here in America, it was quite different than say my wife, who was born in the Middle East. Where Ramadan is not only a time where you're actually, fasting and all that stuff, but in addition, there's a bunch of shows and big series, both kind of religious based and even not religious based, that are on TV all over from the Middle East that you can only find during Ramadan. I mean, imagine it like a month long, right around Christmas time, where all these, the reindeer, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer claymation comes on, and all these kinds of specials that come on during the holidays that are just ones you only see around that time. In this case, it's not necessarily always a repeat, but it's new shows and specials and stuff. But there's just always tons of them, and it's probably the time where specifically, Arab and Islamic countries get the highest of ratings, and YouTube essentially has kind of distilled this all down to one page on their website on YouTube, where they have. If you go to youtube.com/Ramadan, they have a Ramadan focus, but even more specifically an Arab language page that has all this different programming essentially for Muslims and Arab speakers and all that kind of stuff. So they've just got tons and tons of shows. They've got things that are entertainment shows. They've got comedies. They have some again kind of historical and just strictly faith-based informational type of shows, and so you can access it all directly there, and many of them are live, some of them are recorded. Honestly, I don't read Arabic very well, so when I went and looked at it, many of them were titled in Arabic, so I kind of just showed my wife and let her check things out. But then they also have a number of live streaming channels related to it, to, for instance, see everybody praying at Mecca live and a bunch of other stuff. I didn't get a chance to see the Hangouts that they have, because they're supposed to be using Hangouts as well, where I believe they said they're showing off, where was it? They said, I think they were doing some Hangouts where they were actually like every evening or every day showing somebody cooking a meal, and, almost like a cooking show specifically for Ramadan, because obviously people are interested in cooking a nice meal at the end of the day. And so in any case, I think the thing that struck me was that they were creating this channel. And I don't know, you've likely heard this, but over the last couple of months, there's been a lot of talk about YouTube trying very hard to create more and more channel-based programming. And I know that they've done some things in the past. I don't remember in comparison if they've done it to this level, where you just go to the keyword Ramadan and you see all the stuff under one roof that's related to that particular audience and for that particular event. But I find it quite interesting in seeing it. It's almost on parallel to what Twitter was doing with that NASCAR hashtag that we were talking about, a few episodes back, where you go to the /hashtag NASCAR, and then you've got like all this Twitter content specifically focused for the NASCAR races and such. And so I don't know. What did you think about it? I think it's kind of showing they're playing their cards a little bit more now. And have you seen something like this done before?
Well, I think that's probably the part that I find most interesting, is everything starting to come together. So, Google has always talked about Google Plus as this social backbone for their products, and this is really highlighting that. So you've got YouTube suddenly acting as this very solid video-based content strategy. You can then, share on a more person-to-person level through Google Hangouts and, post updates onto your Google Plus page. You're starting to see some of these pieces fall into place, and, it goes really deep into telling the story. It's not just, oh, here's a video and, watch this for 20 minutes and now your experience is done. It's really creating this ongoing experience. And I think that's something that's interesting for brands to think about, is not just, what's the quick video that I put out there and now, I can check that box. Hey, I've created some content, but how do you actually engage people on an ongoing basis and start to tie various things together? So video connecting to chats, connecting to social networks, connecting to imagery, and bringing that all together to tell a story. I think that's probably kind of an interesting takeaway that I was seeing from how Google has really embraced this this holiday.
Yeah, and I don't think they overdid it in the sense that when you go to the page, it's all displayed in a way that's just kind of pretty straightforward. They didn't go overboard with making it too complicated. And in fact, the interesting thing is this big advertisement that they have. I think basically the whole page has been taken over by Lipton tea because essentially people in the Middle East, especially, they're big tea drinkers, right? And so I think it was a really smart placement to be associated with that and to kind of participate in that way. And again, I think I was a little surprised to see that it was completely in Arabic because, Arabs are not actually the number one population, Muslim ethnicity, ethnic majority. And so I just thought it was pretty interesting to just have it, maybe because the content is in Arabic or something like that. But I could see something like this expanding even beyond that, where maybe you have an English version of the channel, you have an Arabic version of the channel. Let's see, is something like this going to happen for Christmas? Could YouTube do something like that for the Olympics? I haven't heard anything like that happening just yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they roll this out to other events and other activities, and again, really start to bring these pieces together, because I think that could be yet another reason why people are going to give Google Plus a second or a third look and start to see value in that network. So again, we've always talked about how Google and Google Plus specifically, it kind of exists and it's not something that we've paid a lot of attention to, but I think, we're seeing more and more signs that Google's continuing to push this and, continuing to put a lot of effort behind making it a success.
So what's up next?
Well, next we had an interesting kind of two-part story. So the title of this section is Junk Web, and it actually came from a couple of different stories, the first of which was a post by Ignite Social Media, who created a blog post called 10 Examples of Visually Engaging Facebook Updates. And when I saw this, I bookmarked it just as a sort of thought starter. It had some interesting examples of ways brands are using or creating images for Facebook. And this is something that we've talked a lot about on the show, creating this visual strategy and kind of thinking about new ways of engaging your online audience using visuals. And so, this was something, it was like, it's kind of some cool examples. And then we both stumbled upon this post by Chris Brogan called Junk Web. And he actually kind of, I don't know if he coined that term, but that's the first time that I've heard that term. But he was labeling this practice of taking an image and putting text on top of it as the junk web, sort of easy to interact with content, but it's not necessarily deep. It's sort of shallow, quick interactions. It's kind of like junk food. You get in, you see it, you interact with it, and you're gone. There's no long-term nutritional value. So I thought maybe we'd run through a couple of these visual examples and talk about some trends we were noticing, and then maybe just talk about the idea of this junk web and, some potential takeaways or things to consider as a brand. How's that sound?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so just talking through a couple of these examples here. One was from Fanta, and they actually have a picture of a pool, and over top of it, it's written cannonball or dive. And so they posted an update that says, dive right in or make a big splash. And I think this is something we saw a couple of times throughout this post. It's taking a concept that's been around on Facebook for a long time, which is this poll or kind of asking your audience, A versus B, which one would you want to do? It's easy to post. It's easy to interact with. It's very smart content as long as you can create a high volume of that type of content. You're going to generate a lot of interaction, which is going to work well in the Facebook system for getting your content seen. The other trend that I was noticing is a lot of fill in the blank. So they gave an example of Disney. They had an update. It just says basically in like plain text over top of a giant blue box. It says, if I could spend a day with a Disney character, I would choose blank. And that actually got 50,000 comments. And Disney's a huge brand. It's got a lot of very passionate fans. But something as simple as, white text on a blue background generating 50,000 comments is something to pay attention to.
And it's not even just those comments, right? I mean, it was 43,000, almost 44,000 likes and almost 9,000 shares. And I almost think, the comments obviously are a big deal, but when the shares, I think, are a really big metric when it comes to extending the reach beyond the folks that are seeing it directly on your fan page.
Yeah, that's a good point. And another example was Coca-Cola, which actually took it a little more conceptual. So they've got an outline of a Coke bottle, and then the word is, and then a picture of the Facebook like button, and then an underline. So it's basically Coke is like blank. And that got 13,000 likes, 2,000 comments, 237 shares, a ton of interaction off of what's basically a couple of pieces of clip art like glued together inside of this status update. And this isn't something like a one-off. They tried it and they're like, oh, we'll put this out there. This is sort of an ongoing content strategy. So the next one they have was blank goes better with, and again, just the outline of the bottle. So blank goes better with Coke. That had 5,000 likes, 3,600 comments, 357 shares, really a lot of solid engagement. And this isn't something that's complicated to produce. You could essentially put this together with like MS Paint or something. It doesn't take a whole art department that's, furiously working away for 16 hours a day trying to create this content. It's just smart use of the assets you have at your disposal and, a willingness and ability to test inside of Facebook and see what works and then reproduce that and test and learn and adapt to the changing Facebook ecosystem. And I think this is really good examples of brands that have taken that advice of create an image strategy and they've run with it, and they've realized that it doesn't take a drastic altering of the existing plan that you have for how to engage on Facebook. You just take your existing content and package it in a slightly new way, and suddenly you're getting high engagement numbers again. So I think this is some great examples of easy ways to do that, and I recommend people check out this blog post for other examples of that.
Yeah, I think even more importantly than just saying it's kind of a low-hanging fruit way of doing it. If you really think about it, most of these folks are really riding off of their brand equity. Mm-hmm. And so they're doing it for the sake of brand equity as well. So and the brand to have a brand presence and awareness on Facebook, the reach of that content just kind of reminds people that they're there and that they're available and so on. So there's no real huge call to action other than to kind of just have fun and interact with it. But all of it is playing off the brand equity. So you look at something like Coke, they definitely use, for instance, their colors to their advantage and the shape of the bottle, which is, for the most part, Coke is pretty much associated with the bottle, the kind of old glass bottle type of look and feel versus, say, Pepsi, which I think is more, associated with a can. And then even Disney with the kind of powder blue or whatever you want to call it. And then they, of course, use the name in the Disney font, which is their logo as well, which just nobody can kind of mistake when they see it. And so I think they're really using their brand to their advantage. The most repeated element in the Coke one, again, out of 3 that are on this post is the bottle. And then you come down to the next one you have here, and we've got Sharpie, who I think obviously could have gone and used a font if they wanted to and just had a picture of a Sharpie or their logo, but they actually wrote the words with the Sharpie pen. Mm-hmm. And so again, I think they all did a real good job of kind of leveraging the power of their own brand equity to make something, like you said, that was really, really, really simple. It doesn't take an entire art department to do and so on. But, before we jump into the kind of, Chris Brogan was talking about a little bit, what do you think? Do you think because it's so quick and easy, there's anything wrong with that?
I don't think so. I think that part of what works well for this is it's also repurposable content. So we're looking at it inside of Facebook, but there's no reason you couldn't take these same images and add them on Pinterest or, one of the brands I've seen do this well is Red Bull. They actually take the same image that they're posting on Facebook and they post that on Instagram. They're essentially getting double the engagement for the same amount of work. So I think that, a lot of these social networks are starting to form themselves around image sharing. And so if you can create a really solid image, you can repurpose it on a number of different channels and get great engagement on each of those channels. We talked last week, or it might have been the week before, about how Google Plus, their new iPad app, is all about visuals. And even for updates that don't have a visual, Google Plus kind of assigns it a visual. It gives it a colored background and it puts the text on top. So this is just a brand taking that trend and owning it and making it content that it can get the most out of. What about yourself? What's your take on it?
No, I don't think that it's bad at all. I mean, I think that if all you're doing is relying on that, then it becomes kind of a hollow approach. But I can't say that with my clients and even with my own business that I haven't thought now of strategies to strictly actually take content and package what I call packaging and portioning it, or portioning and packaging, just deciding how to cut it up into different pieces and then package it differently than you would, in its larger format or its an original format, and then putting it into something like this very, very short and sweet image. I mean, really, the images that you see here are things that somebody that's creative could probably pump out a couple of these a day. Not to say you should produce and share a couple of these per day per se, but they're pretty straightforward. And most of them are actually also asking for a call to action, like, cannonball or dive. I mean, questionably, there should be a question mark there because it is meant to be a question, and they've kind of followed that through with the question in the actual caption of the image. But I mean, there's only so far that you can go by always asking a question every time that you post something onto Facebook or well, specifically in this sense, Facebook, or even something like Pinterest, where this thing might have some legs as well. Mm-hmm. You want to talk a little bit about Chris Brogan's post a little more?
Sure. So real quick, I think one thing that caught my eye, honestly, was the fact that he gave a name to it. So that finally lets us, talk about it using a term. So junk web, which I don't know if that's the right word or not. Maybe that's up for debate.
No, I don't think it is. It's not.
But it's at least an interesting way of talking about it. The other thing that he talked about, and he didn't actually talk about it specifically, but this is what it made me think of, is he had a section in this blog post called "Are Links as Important as They Used to Be?" And I thought it was just an interesting thing to think about, because a couple years back, really brands were focused on generating links. You wanted to create content, you wanted other sites to link to that content, and it was all about SEO. Your main goal for a lot of the content you were putting out there was to get Google to rank you higher for keywords and for terms and brand names, and basically the higher you could get on Google, the better. And now we're seeing a little bit of a shift where instead of just focused on links, I got to drive links, it's, well, I'll just create images and I'll create engagement and I'll build this community, and it's not as important for other sites to link to me because I've already got the audience that I need. Now it's just about activating that audience. And so I think this is an interesting, potentially start of a trend where the link is sort of decreasing in importance. And it still is important. You still want to pay attention to your Google results, but at the same time, it's not the end all be all. I think that creating images and keeping people on your own channel. These aren't images that are driving people off to a blog or a third-party site. These are images that encourage engagement inside of the channel itself. I think that's an interesting trend.
Well, and I would arguably say that, when you think about Facebook, yes, these images are driving engagement within Facebook, but there's also plenty of other places where these images reside. I mean, these are images you could put on your blog. These are images that you could we're talking about infographics, right? So infographics, for the most part, can reside on Facebook, but for the most part, they're residing within blogs or within websites. And then, websites like Pinterest, the content actually links elsewhere. So it's not like it's just a dead link. It actually goes elsewhere. It has links referring back to the original source. So I look at it in a few other ways. I look at it as discovery versus search. So when you think of, for instance, when you have links, the reason that people wanted links, links, and links is not necessarily only because people would click those links and go back to the website. That's not specifically it. It's because of, for SEO value, when you have links, it's an endorsement for your site, and those are things that Google was weighing. For the most part, that's why people wanted links. It wasn't, again, because of the referrals back to the source, even though that's a great bonus. But for the most part, it was meant to say, if somebody was to use a search engine of any kind, what was going to help them get the advantage over the other folks when somebody was at that moment looking for information? And when they're looking for information, they're sitting and they're in front of what? A search engine. And search engines take those links and say, there's an endorsement. We're going to make that guy higher in this particular topic if it's relevant and so on. Well, now we're saying, great. Then now there may be some folks that are not even searching at the moment for you. And by discovering you socially, by discovering you through some shared image that was shared on Facebook that was really nifty and fun, that introduced me to your brand for the first time, or maybe one that was actually linked back to something that I didn't know I wanted to have or that I was interested in that's on Pinterest, then suddenly I discover your brand and I find it. And so there's a two sides of the spectrum. There's the search, there's the discovery, there's images that are linked back to the sources, there's images that are completely not linked back to the sources, and then there's, of course, links themselves. So to kind of categorize it as, say, the junk web and not the junk web only, I think is wrong. And he kind of says the smart web when he refers to, I guess, the standard web with links. And he makes some really excellent points in here, actually, about like, well, what should you do? What are the best ways to create images that people can engage with folks? And he just kind of, frames it in a very simple way. But I actually think bottom line is that term was more link bait than anything, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
So in any case, I think we've illustrated it's pretty important to kind of think about this as a potential approach for your brand. And you'll check out the post in the show notes that'll show those really cool posts that, show Disney and Coke and so on. And then I do think that Chris Brogan's post is worth the read, kind of all junk web titling aside, and take a look also at the comments, because there's a lot of discussion going on about what people think about that and their opinions related to that.
All right. Well, that sounds good. So why don't we take a break real quick and actually hop over to an interview I had a chance to do with Riley Gibson, who is the CEO and founder of Napkin Labs. Napkin Labs is actually a Facebook application development company, and they're doing some really interesting things with crowdsourcing and getting your fans involved in building your brand and actually creating ideas to support your brand. They were involved in the Domino's Think Oven, and we'll talk a little bit about that during the interview. So this is the interview I had a chance to do with Riley Gibson, and we hope you enjoy it. All right, I'm joined today by Riley Gibson, the CEO and co-founder of Napkin Labs. How's it going today, Riley?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Nice. So I figure we start off with the basics. Could you describe what Napkin Labs does in 60 seconds or less? What's the elevator pitch for the company?
So we really see Napkin Labs as an extension of Facebook timeline for brand pages. Our big observation is that, these brands are creating really, really rich communities on Facebook. But timeline is such a great storytelling platform for the brand to push messaging, but the voice of the customer is really, really muted and really lost. So it can actually be difficult to create that community. So Napkin Labs has a suite of tools that plug into brand pages to create more of a collaborative dialogue. So companies can actually start crowdsourcing ideas, they can crowdsource stories, they can have, share photos with fans. So it's really this, user-generated content hub that plugs into Facebook. And we feel that that angle, really uncovering the voice of the customer and the passion of the customer, can create that richer community for brands.
So it's interesting you talk about kind of uncovering the voice of the customer. Is that something that inspired you to create Napkin Labs, or what's the story behind the actual starting up of Napkin Labs as a business?
Yeah, Napkin Labs comes from a very different angle than a lot of the Facebook app companies. So prior to Napkin Labs, my co-founder and I worked at an agency doing a lot of new product development and market research. So our tools were, ethnographies, focus groups, surveys. That's really how we collaborated with customers. And through that process, we felt like social media had a bigger place to really redefine the relationship between brands and their customers, and not just, a simple two-way dialogue, but actually letting brands collaborate with thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers. So, the initial insight was, how do we bring focus groups online? And then that's really evolved and grown over the last couple years, and led us to our focus on Facebook, which is really, really much more about creating richer communities that let companies gather insights and ideas, but also really engage customers.
So, one of the things that we talk a lot about on the show is how social media seems to be evolving towards a more visual nature. And, it seems like brands at this point have to kind of be thinking about a visual strategy. And you guys have apps like Photoboard and Storyboard that tap into this visual trend. So, what role do you think photos and, even videos are going to play in social media in the future?
I think rich media, photos, videos, that kind of thing are so crucial. If you look at just how Pinterest blew up, I think a lot of it relates to just our shortening attention span. So if you can, look through photos and just kind of browse and scroll, rather than reading a bunch of text, it can really communicate things quicker. And I think that content is much richer for customers. Another data point is just looking at posts that brands post on Facebook. The ones that include photos or videos, typically get way, way more engagement than just text posts. So I think, visual thinking, just the idea of photos and videos and communicating visually is really important given all the noise in the social media space. So it's something we really try and focus on.
So another thing that we noticed is social media seems to work well when brands are willing to be transparent. And you guys have apps like Brainstorm and Pipeline that really seem like great ways to facilitate more transparency. But I know that this can be a challenge for brands. So what changes do you think a company needs to make internally before it can kind of make the most of the apps that you guys have and really take advantage of transparency and community involvement?
Yeah, so I think you touch on a really important point, which is, the tools are one thing, they're just a tool, but the people running it, the people engaging, are what's really important. So culturally within a company, a lot has to be aligned for some of our tools and a lot of what's happening in social media to I think, be successful. So, one of the things we talk with about companies is just being more open. A lot of companies, are worried about if ideas come through or if people talk badly about the brand, then that's going to tarnish basically their message. So the one thing we like to communicate is brands kind of have to get over that hump and realize that, whether they provide the platform or not, customers are talking online. And those conversations are starting to outpace what the brands can curate and create. So brands really have to get comfortable with providing better platforms to host those conversations, and be comfortable with the negativity. Because at the end of the day, taking the good and the bad of what customers have to say actually creates more trust. So it can be a benefit depending on how companies respond to that. So I think one of the major hurdles is just, being okay with losing some level of control and realizing that in the end, that can actually create deeper trust with customers.
Yeah, that's great advice. So, as social media becomes increasingly mobile, what changes is Napkin Labs anticipating in the next 12 months? And then maybe as a follow-up, what should brands be considering as they're making a shift towards mobile?
Mobile is going to revolutionize commerce. It's going to do a lot of things that we don't even know yet. One of the things from Napkin Labs' perspective that's so incredibly exciting is that every single person in the world is going to have this basically content creation engine. So they have a camera, they have a video camera, they have everything they need to create great content in their pocket. And being a company that's really focused on this idea of crowdsourcing and user-generated content, for us, it's really exciting because we can start capturing photos and videos in real time from these customers anywhere in the world. And for brands, that should be really exciting as well, because the richness of insights, you can actually have a real-time window into all of your customers. And so I think that's something that's really exciting from our point of view. So we're doing a lot of work around, how do we integrate with Instagram? How do we integrate with other mobile platforms so that users can basically, take a picture of a cool product they see, or a cool, really revolutionized or really interesting packaging, and have that go straight to the brand. So the brand has again that window into their customers.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You're empowering that mobile consumer and connecting them with the brand. So, So you guys have a Superfans app, and as far as I understand it, the purpose of that app is to enable brands to kind of find and reward their most influential fans. But I know that online influence has been kind of a hotly debated topic, and you've got services like Clout that have attempted to give influence a score. So what is your take on online influence, and what should brands be considering when they're thinking of developing some sort of influencer-focused program?
I think in the greater space of influence, it's still, there's no maturity in the market or the tools. So a lot of it, I feel like, and this is kind of just a personal opinion, but I feel like some of it is so generalized, and companies focus so much on getting influence down to one number, that a lot of the meaning and the value of it is somewhat lost. So, for some brand, if someone is influential in general, that has no reflection of whether they're influential about that brand, and whether they're influential over their friends, which is what's really important. So I think the space has a lot of room to grow. From our perspective, it's difficult to boil it down to one number. So what we've tried to do is, first of all, focus by community. So our Superfans tool really looks at Facebook, and who's influential, who's really active within your Facebook community, to really narrow it down. And then we also look at it by breaking our sort of soul number out into a bunch of different personas. So we don't just want to look at influence. We want to look at who's most active. We want to look at, who has a greater number of friends, and when they speak, their friends listen. So we're trying to break that out into a few different categories so that, brands can get a greater picture of not just the influence of their community, but what that influence actually can mean for them. So I'm really excited to see where the space goes. I think, again, it has a ton of room to grow, and right now it's kind of teetering on that area of meaninglessness. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for companies to really start creating these influencer communities. I like to call them advocate communities or ambassador communities. Because the cool part is, once you start building that group over time, really empowering them to share the brand voice, they become part of your marketing team. And so in the end, it's sort of redefining the boundaries of companies. Companies used to be defined by their close partners and their employees. And I think with social media, those boundaries are getting blurred. And customers, advocates are really becoming part of the brands they love.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. So what's one thing that you think brands should be doing more of on Facebook?
Well, I'm biased about this, but I think brands need to do a lot more listening. I think the focus has been on, pushing content, which is absolutely required. I think that's a foundational element to building a community. But in the end, companies need to start being a little bit more humble and asking their fans, asking their customers for content that they can then sort of repurpose and push out as much more authentic messaging, and just start listening to customers and bringing social media deeper into the company. So, you're not just getting feedback and answering the person and saying that's great, but actually pushing that feedback deeper into the organization. So getting it in front of the new product development teams, getting it in front of the marketing teams.
And then as a follow-up question, what is one thing you think brands maybe should be doing a little bit less of on Facebook?
I think a lot of brands are taking basically old practices and trying to implement them within Facebook. And when you're in the context of a social network, I think the rules of the game change a lot. So one of the things I see tons of is brands trying to just acquire likes as fast as they can. So it's constant sweepstakes, constant, somewhat cheesy contests, just to sort of, and like gating to get more and more likes. And I think a lot of that is generating likes, but it's also building somewhat empty communities, and building communities that are pretty much prize seekers. So, I'd like to see companies sort of take their Facebook communities more seriously and really realize that a lot of true value can be drawn from those fans in terms of insights, ideas, etc. So, hopefully we'll see less sweepstakes over time, and more kind of real, genuine engagement.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and it's nice that Napkin Labs is out there trying to help companies put some of those advice into practice. So, well, Riley, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate the time and appreciate the advice you're able to share with the listeners here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, so let's dive back into, I think, the last main topic that we had for today, Adam, and this was Bag the Bag Lunch, a promotion that Chili's was putting on, and this was something that you actually got involved with through a Clout perk. So why don't you take us through it and kind of talk about that experience a little bit?
Yeah, so this was kind of fun. Clout has the perk thing going on where influencers are sent, they're showered with gifts and invited to far off exotic places and things like that. But they sent me off a Chili's gift card for $10, and the gift card had this little plastic backing that said, had this little paper bag character, kind of like the Fandango paper bag guys, and said, and it has had the hashtag Bag the Bag Lunch. Come check out and share my videos at bagthebaglunch.com, sort of thing. So I said, what the heck? Let me check it out. And they had a really simple microsite that basically said, want free chips and salsa? Of course you do, because you have working taste buds. And so it had these videos that are really cool that just you go through the process, step 1, step 2, to write in any name that you want. So, for instance, I think the person I ended up sending it to you is you, Corey. And I just put Corey O'Brien, and then they've got the 3 videos that has this little paper bag character kind of in a workplace situation. And when you preview it, it looks like somebody, your mom's written your name on your lunch bag, and you've got it sitting on your desk at work or in the fridge in another video. And the little bag starts to talk, and what he's doing is kind of egging you on to say, get the heck out of work. Get away from having your bag lunch at work. Why don't you go out and do something exciting, like take advantage of Chili's? They have their lunch combos or whatever they called it that were only $6 and cheap and awesome. And so it was pretty cool. I sent one to Corey. Corey saw it and he kind of chuckled and played around with I think maybe sending a couple himself and seeing what he could put on there. But they kept it really, really simple. And in the end, they gave me a coupon to get free chips and salsa, which is something arguably they could give away for free. So it was really kind of easy for them to do that without kind of going over the top in regards to the expense that they have for incentivizing folks. But the thing that I felt was there were a number of things that I felt were really interesting about this. And I think you agreed with a lot of them. We were talking about this earlier is, it's interesting to see them use Clout. I think unlike some of the other Clout perks that have been given out in the past, rather than just kind of simply giving it out, I think they did a good job of using Clout as kind of a loop. Mm-hmm. So they got it out to people with Clout. It really didn't take them much. They gave it to a few folks. I mean, I don't know how many people they gave it out to, these $10 certificates. And then they kind of give them this call to action, essentially, with this plastic backing, with the hopes that they'll end up, kind of checking it out and doing something. There was a good use of video and humor and customization. That customization was really super simple. They didn't go over the top. It made it more fun to customize it. It made you want to send it out to more people instead of say, people directly. So I sent the video directly to you, and then I actually posted it directly to another friend on his Facebook wall, which he thought was pretty funny. Gave him a laugh. And so they added that social element of both customization and being able to send it personally via Facebook, Twitter, and via email. They also, again, you've already got this as quote unquote an influencer because of the clout perk. They gave me a $10 gift certificate, but then they go and turn around and also give everybody else that you give it to a coupon for free chips and salsa. So that's another incentive. I think their focus on their target audience was really good. It was darn near razor sharp in the sense that, their videos and everything were focused on people who would go to work and bring bagged lunches to work and probably not go out for work. They would, not go out for lunch. They would sit at work and they would eat their lunch and they wouldn't go out and enjoy themselves. And so they were really, really focusing on that person, that type of individual with all the videos that they were doing. They didn't go beyond that. Not to say that it wouldn't be fun or interesting to anybody else. And I think the whole overall site itself was done in a way that made it super simple for people. They didn't try to overdo it. Even the design of the site was just kind of friendly and engaging with a little kind of rough quality to it. I think, Corey, you pointed out some of the possible issues that you might have seen, which were not necessarily huge, at least in my mind. What did you think those were?
So, yeah, I didn't even want to point it out as an issue, just as an interesting choice that they made. So, when the video is created, and it's actually interesting because it's using, I don't even know the right term for it, but kind of dynamic video, where it's got a pre-shot video, but then it's dynamically putting text over top of the bag that moves with the video, and it looks like it's written on the bag, though it's obviously not, because they can't just, quickly write that and redo this video every time somebody submits it. So it's taking this variable of text that you enter and it puts that on the bag. And so when you had sent it to me, Adam, it had my full last name, which has an apostrophe in it. And sometimes some of these, kind of fancy online programs butcher an apostrophe and it'll turn it into some funky HTML text. And so I was like, well, I wonder how they're doing this. And so I looked up in the URL, and I was surprised to see that the actual apostrophe was in the URL. So it was basically pulling the text string from the URL. So I thought, well, that's interesting. All it's doing is looking at this variable inside of a URL and then putting that on the bag. I wonder how lenient it is with allowing you to write something and have it put on this bag. So,
and there goes Corey with his fun time.
So I was like, well, let's pick out a couple 4-letter words and see what I can get on this bag. And so there's this Chili's.
Let's just say I got a bag of poop on my desk is what happened.
I was like, dog poop in all capital letters, and there's a bag of dog poop dancing around on my screen talking to me about Chili's and wanting to go out for lunch. So I'm like, well, that's really interesting. Like, not necessarily bad. It's a conversation starter, and it started a conversation between you and I. So I think, for certain brands, if you're willing to accept, like, hey, some people are gonna, their fun is like putting weird words in this thing and seeing what it looks like and kind of getting a chuckle out of that. Like, I got to laugh at watching a bag full of dog poop dance around on the screen. And, I think that's fun. And there's a lot of brands
that amuse Corey. The things that amuse Corey.
And I think I tried out my Twitter name and it accepted the @ sign. You could pretty much put anything you wanted on this thing. And there's a lot of brands that are kind of fearful of that. They're like, oh, what if somebody, takes a screenshot of this, promotion that we're doing with a word that we don't want, and suddenly that's associated with our brand. And, yeah, that might be true, but at the same time, like, kind of who cares? You're generating conversation. People are checking out this thing that you built. They're getting a laugh out of it. They're more likely to share it if, they see some funny word on there and they're like, oh, I got to share this with all my friends. Look what I did. So, I think that's interesting. I'm not sure if it was a technical limitation, if they just couldn't do a blacklist, but I'd imagine because it's using a URL string, they could have just said, if the URL contains dog poop, like just put a 301 error or some sort of like cannot find this
the
site
URL
error.
Contains dog poop.
Right? Like they could have figured out, they could have blocked at least certain things. This was like no holds barred. You could put anything you wanted on this bag. So
I don't even want to know the other things that you tried putting in there. But I saw it as the way that they did it like almost like quick and dirty, but they understood the limitations and the possibilities that could happen. Because, so for instance, it wasn't like it was generating a YouTube mashup of something, right? Where suddenly that video ended up being generated and then it's put on YouTube forever and ever and ever for somebody to have, have visible there. Yes, you could create a URL just like you said, and that URL essentially could be shared with whoever's out there. But for the most part, it has to be shared on a one-to-one basis. There's not even, from what I remember, there's not even embed codes. Right. So like I could share it on Facebook. I couldn't actually share it on, I could share it on Facebook. And this was the downside for me, in fact, was when you share it on Facebook, you have to actually authorize it as a Facebook application. So Bag the Bag Lunch had to be first authorized to access my Facebook account and its information before it ended up being posted onto my Facebook page. And I understand why. I understand that, it was basically asking because it actually gave me a list of all my friends and said, which of your friends would you like this to be sent off to? Where I think that it could have been, it could have potentially instead used the Open Graph data to share it just like I would share anything else to either my wall or my friends or whatever if I were to click a Facebook like button or a Facebook share button. I think the kind of most technically seamless way to do it, or not seamless, but kind of foolproof way to do it, is when you give authorization to an app like this to your Facebook account, then they can craft a much more custom, seamless experience. Whereas, and in this case, they didn't have to create, for instance, a hosted video on a hosted page for every single instance, and then have Open Graph data. And I'm getting technical here with this, but have Open Graph data that could then embed that video like you would on YouTube, for instance. Mm-hmm. But I think that's why they did that. And I kind of I think that they just did what they could quick and dirty, and they realized that the dynamics of it would really, really minimize the chance. Even the name on the lunch bag didn't really have a huge bearing on whether or not you enjoyed the experience of the video, right?
Yeah, it was a dancing bag with kind of these weird googly eyes, and you're laughing at the bag as is. So the name is just there to add that little nice touch of social to it. Yeah, there it is in the Google Hangout. Adam's got a picture of it. But it's a nice little touch, but it definitely didn't distract from the overall message. You could put, again, whatever you wanted in there, and it still got the point across of, hey, let's all go out to Chili's and skip the bag lunch and get a real meal.
So I'd give this a thumbs up, and a lot of times we end up seeing a number of issues as much as we see good points when it comes to these folks doing this, where they could really have done it a ton better. I actually think these guys did just a great job, and it's a good example of how to make something kind of simple and engaging and kind of well-rounded, as far as I'm concerned, in regards to its interaction with people in real life, on the web, socially, through video versus just simply text, the whole 9 yards. I think they did a good job.
I agree. All right, so let's dive into the tool review of the day. And the application we're going to look at today is called Analytics, and it's actually spelled a little funky. It's ANALYTIKS. So analyticsapp.com is where you can find this. It's actually an iPhone application that's designed to create reports for your Google Analytics data. So Google Analytics is a very popular way of getting usage data for a website. You just add a little bit of code, and then the Google system tracks users of that website. It can show you where traffic's coming from, where it goes to, what the most popular areas of your site are. But there's a lot of data there. And so what this analytics app does is actually pares it down into just some of the more useful and more valuable data so that you can keep track of your site at a glance. It does things like break out demographics, browsers, compares desktop to mobile usage, compares PC to Mac. It looks at time spent on site, what percentage of your traffic is organic, and then what are your ratio of new versus returning users. But that's about it. And if you're familiar with Google Analytics, there's a ton more. There's funneling, there's all sorts of different stuff. But Analytics says, hey, if you want that, go onto your desktop, pay attention to Google Analytics. But if you want to just see, in a quick glance how your site's doing, this is the app for that. And I thought it was really interesting because it's kind of building an infographic. So it represents your data in a really interesting way. Instead of just relying on numbers, it actually uses symbols to give you an idea for what's going on. So again, one of the categories to compare is PC versus Mac. And it's got a little circle that represents 100% with two different colored segments to represent the percentage. But then it actually has the icon for the one that has the higher percent. So if more of your visitors come from a Mac, it just shows the OS X icon inside of this circle. And it doesn't worry about the PC. It just says, hey, more of your users are Mac. Here's the Mac icon. You know, it's creating this easy to use infographic on the fly. I think that's really great. It makes it easy to spot trends. It makes it easy to make sense of your data. So you're looking at all these things, you're like, what the heck is this trying to tell me? Oh, there it is. I can see a picture of a PC. I can see a picture of a mobile device. I can see, you know, the Firefox icon. It all really clicks and makes it makes sense right at first glance. You can break your data out into various chunks. So you can look at 30 days, 3 months, 6 months, and then a year of data. And that's all easy to kind of glance through. You can actually create reports from this application. So again, it creates kind of a more permanent infographic. You can then share that report on Facebook or Twitter or even via email. So if you want to brag a little bit or maybe you need to check in with other people and share those stats, you can actually do that from within the app. The limitations, as I mentioned, it doesn't do a deep dive into every statistic. So there isn't even an option. It's not like, oh, it all looks pretty, and then you can flip it around, and behind there is, you know, all the data. It just says, hey, if you want the deep dive, do that elsewhere. This is really just an overview. And it's also limited to 5 sites. So believe it or not, I actually have Google Analytics running on more than 5 sites, and unfortunately, I can't access that inside of Analytics. And what's interesting is it connects to your Analytics account, and it actually pulls all of your sites into the application. It just doesn't show them on the main screen. So if you want to view beyond those 5 sites, you have to go into the settings, you know, move one out of your main 5, move the other back up into the main 5. I think that's a little bit confusing. I almost wish they offered like a paid upgrade or a pro account that just lets you have an unlimited number of sites. So that's an interesting limitation to me and potentially something that they're going to fix in the future. But I think if you're somebody that pays attention to stats, you want an easy way to keep up with it on the go, I would give Analytics a try. I think it's a beautiful app. It's easy to use. It's easy to set up. And it's useful. Like I said, it gives you quick access to important data on the go and makes it easy to both keep track of yourself and share it with others. So I give Analytics 2 thumbs up.
Thanks for making me spend 99 cents during the show here.
99 cents, well spent, well spent.
Yeah, I just used it now, so maybe I should have listened to the entire spiel first. But no, I'll be able to shuffle, you know, one in and out of that 5 space queue there.
There you go. And it actually, it's interesting in that, you know, it is only 99 cents. I think it's not an expensive app, so it's fun to kind of just play around with and say, hey, this is some interesting use of my data. And it does a cool thing where when you first load it up, it asks you the color of your phone. So it says, do you have a white phone or black phone? And then it customizes the app to your phone. So I've got a white iPhone. I said white, and it used the lighter theme. You can switch that later if you want to see what the darker theme looks like, but I thought that was a really kind of neat touch and actually shows that, hey, they pay attention to the little things. They want the overall application experience to match the color of your device. I thought that was very smart and something that I haven't seen other apps do.
All right, so we've got to get to the final leg of our show here so I could play with the Analytics app after the show.
All right,
so
you know what the final leg is, right?
It is the lightning round.
The always exciting lightning round. All right, for those of you not familiar with the lightning round, it's where we put 60 seconds on the clock and run through 3 separate stories where both Adam and I have 60 seconds to give our take on the story and then subsequently respond to that take. So it's basically 3 stories with 2 minutes of rundown for each story, and it's a lot of fun. So, Adam, do you want to take first crack at the celeb boutique story?
Yeah. Okay. Just let me know. I know you got to get that timer ready.
All right. Timer is ready. 60 seconds on the clock. Ready and go.
All right. So we all know about the unfortunate events that happened in Colorado last week, last Friday at the premiere of The Dark Knight. And so the hashtag was trending Aurora for the location, the city in Colorado where this happened on Twitter. shortly thereafter. And Celeb Boutique, which is a brand, I believe, that sells celebrity-related clothing items and fashion stuff, said they went ahead and tweeted, Aurora, using the hashtag, is trending, clearly about our Kim K-inspired Aurora dress. Shop, and then they have a link directly to the Aurora dress. And so everybody was immediately up in arms about the fact that this was just a distasteful thing to do, to be piggybacking on this trend that was about the tragedy that had happened. And Aurora ends up saying, oh my gosh, we didn't know that this was going on. We had no idea about this. And we're very, very sorry about what happened. I know you'll go ahead and expand upon that, Corey.
There we go. 60 seconds done. All right, 60 seconds back on the clock for my response. Ready and go. So I'm torn on this one. I think that, yes, it was clearly a mistake, and it was, it was a simple click away. All they had to do is click on the hashtag, and they would have seen all these people talking about something that clearly they would not have wanted to associate their brand with. So, yes, very dumb mistake. But at the same time, I almost wonder if we're too quick to jump and, beat down companies that make these mistakes. They deleted that tweet. They posted, a number of tweets apologizing. It was an honest mistake. And I think that it happened to be for a very unfortunate incident. But at the same time, everybody's made mistakes. Everybody's seen something and kind of made a quick action or a quick judgment on it and been wrong and realized later. And so, I sort of go back and forth. I think that, yes, this was a mistake. Like I said, they should have just clicked on that hashtag and seen what people were talking about before assuming they must be talking about our stuff. But, give them a break. All right, 60 seconds is up. So let's move on to our next story. How many people use Twitter's own app? So I think, Adam, if you don't mind, I'll take a crack at this one.
Go for it.
All right, just pulling it up here before we start the timer. All right, 60 seconds, ready and go. So this was a follow-up on something that we had talked previously, which is what are people using to access Twitter? And Benjamin Mayo actually pulled over 1 million tweets from the Twitter streaming API and examined what client those were posted by, and then compared some of that data. And surprisingly, the number 1 through 4 applications were Twitter-owned properties. The number 1 most popular source for creating a tweet was the web, with 243,000 updates out of this million that he pulled, followed by Twitter for iPhone, Twitter for Android, and Twitter for BlackBerry. The first non-Twitter-owned client that shows up is actually Uber Social for BlackBerry, which kind of surprised me. I was like, Uber Social? I guess me not being a BlackBerry user, I wasn't familiar, but there's a lot of BlackBerry people out there cranking out updates through Uber Social. The main takeaway for this was that 70+% of these applications were owned by Twitter, which means they've got a ton of control over that space. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on Twitter's dominance in the tweet space? Go.
So there wasn't that long ago where nobody was using Twitter.com, or at least a large majority, because the folks that were on there were primarily early adopters, and Twitter's experience on its own website sucked in comparison to a lot of these automated not automated tools, but more kind of rich and interactive tools like TweetDeck and Twirl, which eventually turned into Seismic and so on back in the day. And so nowadays we've actually seen, because of their beefing up of their web application, that it's made kind of a resurgence where people who have now joined Twitter and the people who continue to join Twitter pretty much are happy with what they see on Twitter for a short period of time before they decide to say, I'm going to try out this tool and that tool. But they don't feel just completely averse to using Twitter.com as a main place. So this kind of echoes data that we saw a couple episodes back with a kind of similar take, but it doesn't necessarily surprise me.
All right, just in the nick of time as the alarm goes off. All right, so last story of the day, I will round it out. 60 seconds on the clock, ready and go. So this was a story put out by All Things D called Pinterest Blocks Marketers Along with Spammers. And this one actually did catch me by surprise. Essentially what happened is Twitter was blocking links that contained affiliate links, URL shorteners, or anything that had information added to the end of a URL. And, we'd seen this a while back where people were posting Amazon affiliate links and Pinterest was taking those over and adding in their own affiliate code, which people got a little frustrated with. But I thought the idea of blocking anything that used a URL shortener is really interesting. A lot of these Pinterest analytics tools use URL shorteners or use specific URLs to actually track data inside of the Pinterest system. And Pinterest, with one fell swoop, has essentially cut off that lifeline for marketers and said, "Hey, you're not allowed to track information inside of our system that way." And maybe they've got their own system coming out that they're hoping to push users towards. But I thought this was interesting and could alter the Pinterest space for marketers pretty drastically. Whew, just in time. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on Pinterest changing the way it handles links?
The short and skinny of it is it sucks, for marketers initially because you've got to now wait for them to release something or for something to come out to kind of have the hopes and prayers that Pinterest is going to go ahead and release something that's going to help you with your track your metrics. I know I did some URL shortening stuff. I've actually used not PinReach, but I think it's called Pinnerly. That, like you said, it basically shortens it and adds tracking before it ends up putting it on. And so all in all, it's going to be really interesting to see. I don't know why they would exclude folks from using it in addition to potentially offering something in the future. But we'll see how it goes in the long run. And it's going to be the difference between people feel that they really want to use Pinterest for marketing or not, because it's going to be hard to measure the success of those your efforts on it.
All right, 6 bonus seconds. I might actually use these 6 bonus seconds to just mention the fact that PinReach, which you mentioned, did actually sell itself recently on Flippa, an online site for selling websites, and it actually sold for a measly $10,000, which was surprising. So I think that might be the first casualty of this overall shift that Pinterest is making to essentially own all aspects of the data inside of that system. All right, well, that ends the lightning round, which means that we are calling this show a wrap. Anything else you wanted to cover this week, Adam, or should we go through the usual end of our show information?
I think we might have actually just finished on time today, right?
All right, well done for us. All right, well, as always, we do want to thank the audience. We really appreciate everybody that listens to the show, and really, we wouldn't do this without you. So we hope that you get a lot of value out of the show, and we appreciate returning to check it out, both during the Google Hangout live stream and also when we put the final episodes online. If we had one request for the audience, it would be that you rate us in iTunes. That really helps us to spread the word about the show. Apple uses that to determine what they feature inside of things like their podcast app. So a rating on iTunes is actually really valuable for us, really important, and helps us to build the audience. So we would really appreciate that.
And I just want to second that, just to kind of emphasize the point that we have very little ratings on there right now in regards to actually somebody putting a review up. Actually, the ratings, we've got a number of ratings, but the review, and in both cases, it's really important. Like you said, it's kind of like, if I was a website, I would want inbound links. And if I was a podcast, I want ratings. I want stars and reviews. And we don't expect every single review to be a 5-star. It would be great and it would be awesome if that was the case. But please, if you are listening, it would be really awesome, because we say this every single week and we haven't really seen a lot of response week over week. And so I'm just kind of drawing that attention out a little bit more, because it would be really awesome if you just take the time after the show, if you're listening to it, to just go over to iTunes and leave your input for us, because we definitely do also pay attention to that and take it to heart when there's honest feedback on there, whether it's positive or less than that.
There you go. And if you do have feedback and you've already put it into iTunes, you might as well let us know directly as well. And there's a number of ways to get in touch. If you want to either ask us questions, suggest topics, give feedback, or hey, even if you just want to say hi and introduce yourself, we would appreciate that. So one of the easiest ways is going to be through Twitter. You can reach the show. It's at SoloMoShow. Or if you want to reach myself directly, I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi.
You can also reach us via email. It's solomoshow@gmail.com.
And you can also reach us on our Facebook page. Just search for Solo Mo Show, as well as on Google+. And we have a board with all of the episodes that we've posted from our YouTube channel over on Pinterest.
There we go. And as always, all of the links that we discussed today, as well as the links that we just mentioned to our social channels, can be found in the show notes. And the easiest way to view those is at solomoshow.com. or they're also available in your podcast player of choice. If you look around, you should have an option of viewing show notes, and that's going to be a full list of all the links that we discussed. It's a great way to kind of keep up with what we're talking about, check it out for yourself, and really dive deeper into some of the topics that we covered in this show. So we suggest that you check those out. And with that, we will call this one a wrap, and see you guys next week.
Take care.